For more on this, let's bring in Steve Pruitt. He's a managing partner at Watts Partners and a former staff director for the Budget Committee at the U.S. House of Representatives. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, Steve, we did hear Trump's lawyers really trying to explain the president-elect's plan for his business interests, went through a whole list of reasons and options they went through in terms of divesting them. What are your thoughts?
Well, on one hand, you obviously have to sympathize with his plight. I mean, he's 500 companies, 20 countries, business that he spent his entire life building that he wants to leave for his children. I sympathize with that. However, he's assuming the highest office in the country. He knew what the rules of the game were. And basically, the plan is an attempt to try and change the rules, if you will. Unfortunately, it's not going to work. This is not like filing taxes where you get to bring in your lawyers and your accountants and come up with a program that eliminates some tax liabilities and other things. He's got a requirement that says you have to apply by certain moral and legal standards to serve in the highest office of this country. So he's got work to do.
And certainly when it comes to the moral interest you talk about, people are also looking at the Trump children. He says he's going to be having them running the business, taking control of it, and that they'll be staying separate from their father. How realistic is that?
About as realistic as me playing basketball successfully against Michael Jordan. It's just not going to happen. You don't break up families. You don't limit their conversations. They can discipline themselves, of course, which is what he's suggesting. But the reality is there's going to come a time where there's going to come an issue where Eric is going to pick up the phone and say, "Dad, we got a problem. How should we handle this?"
It does seem like, in terms of this being a family and a family-run business, that it is more likely than not to head in that direction. Now, let's also look at Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who's going to be serving as one of his senior advisors. Now, that's a role that doesn't require Senate confirmation, but some people are wondering, how much of a gray area does this come when it comes to violating anti-nepotism laws?
Well, it is a gray area. It's been gray since the law was originally passed. It was intended, I think, more so to have an impact on cabinet selections. This is America. It's unlike many other countries in the world where the president or premier can bring in his wife to be the minister of education, bring in his son to be vice president, and put them in key roles in government. So that's the intent of the law. The spirit of the law has been complied with fairly significantly and aggressively for many years. So again, the question becomes, do we change a standard that we've lived with in this country for many, many years just to accommodate someone who suggests that they're different, they're special?
And there is that distinction, though, between some of the White House staff positions versus cabinet positions. So it is a gray area, but as you were saying, it's more about also the moral obligation as well.
That's correct.
Now, let's also look at Trump's plan to donate hotel rooms and hotel profits from foreign governments to the Treasury Department. How do you see that playing out?
I'd like to make donations to the Treasury Department as well. I'm happy to recycle bottles and recyclable cans and get the proceeds from that and give it to the federal government if that somehow satisfies people's desire for me to play by the rules.
So does this do anything then?
But the reality is, number one, who's going to determine what the profits are? Are we going to depend upon his accounting? You know, are we going to allow him to set the rules of the road in terms of when those payments are made, how they're made, et cetera? There's a whole lot of questions that get created here. His lawyers, in this case, made a valiant attempt to try and come up with a plan to address a real problem that he has. I applaud them for the effort. Unfortunately, my general feeling is, nice try.
A lot of critics agree with you. They're saying that he didn't really put this issue to bed. So how do you see this perhaps hanging over the president-elect going forward?
Oh, this is going to be a major issue. It's kind of like a festering sore that the opposition, if you will continue to scratch and try to peel the scab off of repeatedly. And unfortunately, because of his efforts to move around the spirit of the law, he's allowing himself to be set up. It's going to divert his attention. It's going to cause problems, I think, politically across the board in terms of whether or not the House, the Senate, and those members who have their own agenda want to be in an environment where this conflict continues to come up and again. Plus, it also raises the bar in terms of people now going back and looking at what those people do.
Right.
As we know, a week ago, they made an attempt to try and change the ethics office situation, and once public got word of that,
exactly.
the uproar, they reversed it.
So
this only brings that back to the surface.
So being that we are seeing this come back to the surface, what would then be a better strategy to really, once and for all, just clear up all these conflicts of interest for Trump?
Well, I mean, there's the simple solution that's been suggested, which is to divest. I think that's a real problem. And the reality is, for anyone who's sitting here looking at this situation, you do have to look at Mr. Trump's situation. Let's be fair to the man.
It is a rare one.
It's a rare one. It's complex. It's not a situation that's going to be easily unwound. He further complicates it again with the proposed plan, because what he's proposing only applies to his properties,
right,
whereas the majority of the business that he has generated, certainly over the last 10 to 20 years, has been all in his branding in terms of putting the Trump name everywhere and getting a licensing fee for doing that. He doesn't get any of those discussions in terms of the current plan that he has.
Right.
So there are a number of shortcomings. Again, the lawyers made a great attempt to try and piece together something that arguably could be sold as an ethical plan, but it hasn't been vetted by any of the appropriate agencies. Later this afternoon, the head of the Office of Government Ethics came out and essentially blasted the plan, saying it was not consistent with the operations in this country and the compliance that we've seen from the last several presidents.
Right.
And it doesn't even come close to what the cabinet appointees of this administration have to do in terms of meeting the ethics requirements. So,
well, definitely something that we'll be keeping an eye on. Unfortunately, we'll have to leave it there.
Not a problem.
Thank you so much for your insight, Steve Pruitt, Managing Partner at Watts Partners. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.